Ay seragari de mere sayette tu sayado Ados tu cuore.
Welcome back, Matteo from Homesteading Italian. It's near the end of March in New Jersey, and 2 weeks ago I seeded several of these trays with vegetable seeds. This particular one's filled with arugula. And when I seeded the trays, I did my best to try to get 1 or 2 seeds in each of the cells of the tray. But in this particular case, arugula has very, very tiny seeds. And when I took my fingertips and rubbed them together, trying to distribute the seeds, I got more than 1 or 2 seeds in each cell. So what I'm going to do today is take these small scissors that my wife was kind enough to let me use, and I'm going to go through each cell and snip off using the scissors the plants that have germinated down to one main plant. It's pretty labor intensive, but it needs to be done. Now, I could have direct seeded this particular crop, the arugula, right into the soil, which I've done in the past, but this year I wanted to see how it would work out, pre-seeding them, getting a jump during the weather that's still kind of cold out, and then direct plant them, or transplant them rather, into the ground, and hopefully I get a good head start on the weather and get this arugula being enjoyed by us. So right now I'm going to continue on with the project. I have a flat that I filled up with potting soil, and then I took another flat identical size and I compressed the soil that was in there. And what that does for me is it gives me about a 1/4 inch portion on the top of an indentation, so when I put the seeds in, the seeds not flush with the top of the flat, which then allows me, once I've got it all seeded, to put some topsoil or potting soil on the surface and then water it down for the final get-go. Prior to bringing this inside, I took it out on the driveway, filled it up with the potting soil, compressed it, and then took the garden hose and gave it a good drenching, allowed it to drain. That way I'm starting out with a moist medium, which kind of jump starts the seeds once they get in there. All right, I'll finish seeding this, put more potting soil on top, and then give it another lighter misting of water, and then it goes under the grow lights. Now, depending on what kind of seeds you're trying to germinate, the grow lights and the environment are different. So for instance, a lot of these grow lights situations will give you either pink or white light. If you're germinating seeds, you want to go with the white light rather than the pink light. And if you're germinating tomatoes and peppers, which we're germinating peppers today, you want to put a heat mat underneath the tray, and that heat should be between 70 and 75 degrees. That'll really help with the success of the germination. Now, the other component that you have to plan ahead is you need to be organized. Otherwise, when you have a full tray of peppers, which I'm about to seed, they look the same when they germinate, right? So I've taken these labels and I've just put the name of each pepper on the label, and I'm going to then systematically run myself down through the tray. Now there's 24 rows in this particular flat, and it works out, the math works out perfectly because I'm seeding 8 different types of peppers. So I'm going to allot 3 rows for each specific type of pepper, which will give me a total of 24 rows. I was never really great in math, but I'm good enough to figure that out. So after each row, I'm going to put in my label, and then also on the computer, I'm going to write down from left to right how I seeded. That way, if by chance one of these labels gets compromised and I can't figure out what the name was on the label, I have the backup on the computer. All right. The other thing I do is I use a surface such as this island in my kitchen, Formica, because when I put the seeds down on the top of the Formica, I can drag my fingers and hopefully get the amount of seed I want to distribute in each cell. I try to prevent overseeding each cell, because then I have to come back with the scissors like I just showed you and thin them out, which I prefer not to do. All right, so this particular one, I'm actually not going to start with that one. It's a Italian red pepper. The seeds should not be so problematic. So I'm just going to sprinkle them out on top of my island. And pepper seeds are pretty good to work with because they're big. So I can drag my finger, pick up one tiny seed, and then place it in the cell. And what I do is I just put my finger pointing to the next cell, and that way I just keep moving my finger along, and that tells me where the next seed needs to go. All right, I'm going to get going on this, and I'll give you a peek of how it looks once it's all seeded. All right, it's been 18 days since I planted this broccoli rabe. It's done a good deal of growing, but now it's time to transplant it from what I consider a very small cell. These particular trays have what's called cells in them, and the particular tray that I used for starting the broccoli rabe in had a 24 count cell, so there's 24 rows of 9 cells. Okay, this one's a lot bigger, so it's going to give the broccoli rabe more room to grow, get bigger before I transplant it outside. So I'm going to use this knife, pop the broccoli rabe out, put it into its new home. I have a bucket of potting soil that I'll supplement around the soil that's in the cells for the broccoli rabe, and we'll get after that. Let me show you though. When you take this knife, you run it right along the edge of the cell, and then you kind of leverage the soil up, and it has a nice compact root mass that allows me to transfer it over and not damage it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'll be back to show you what the finished product looks like. All right, I've transferred all the broccoli rabe that I thought were large enough to have formed a root mass that would allow me to pop them out of the cells in this tray, and then I moved them over to this tray. They'll stay here, again, going back to the grow lights. I'll give them a good watering, and they'll stay in this cell until they get large enough and the weather gets warm enough to transfer them outside. I'll do a little period of hardening off where I'll put them outside, bring them inside, back and forth, kind of toughens them up, and then they'll finally go into the ground. At that time, if I'm still a little bit concerned, I can put some plastic over them as kind of a mini little greenhouse. But right now, this job's done. I'm going to give them a good watering, and then moving on to other projects. So the first thing I do is I take one of the peat pots and I fill it up. So you see there's a lip on the peat pot. I push the soil so it's below that lip. That way when I pour water in to water the tomatoes, it doesn't overflow. And then using a knife, I just come along the side of the tray and I pop the little tomato out. It's got a nice little root mass. And then I take my peat pot and I just simply make a hole in the center, make sure that the soil has good contact, and there it is. It's that simple. I'll do probably 300 of these and plant around 150, and then I'll sell the rest. Tomatoes at this point in the game are getting around $2.50 a pot, one of these. So I can certainly pay myself back for all the expenses of the soil and the peat pots and the seeds and all that business. So, transplanting tomatoes. Underneath me and behind me is a series of corrugated, some of them aren't corrugated, they're flat, but metal panels for roofing. I've scrounged around for these for years. Once I get as many as I need, then this is how I utilize them. So starting in maybe March, I place these on top of all my gardening rows. And as you can see, I have cinder blocks or weights on top of them so they don't fly away like Frisbees. What these do for me is they hold a barrier, if you will, on the soil. So one, the metal heats up the soil quicker, and two, the metal stops any weed development. So I'll give you an example. If I take this cinder block off and I pull this particular sheet out, you can see there's weeds on the side, but there's nothing in the middle. The other thing you might notice is a particular change in soil. Prior to putting the metal down, I wheelbarrowed in a year. It's been a year in development, combination of horse manure, straw from the sheep, bedding, all the good compost. I let that sit. I turned it probably once a week for a year, and then I put that on top of where the tomatoes. Tomatoes are really, really heavy feeders, meaning they're like football players. They need a lot of food. So we supplement whatever the soil has with some great compost.
So I'm going to pull all this metal off, put the rototiller on it, get the bed all raked out nice and neat, and then I'll show you how I plant the tomatoes. I'll tell you what, holding this thing is not for the faint of heart. I don't know if you could see, but it was like holding a kid that just saw an ice cream truck. They're gonna go on you, and this rototiller goes. So make sure you got your strength up, and you've done some sort of exercise prior to the winter doldrums of just sitting around, because you definitely don't want to wake your body up to this. All right, so what I'm going to do now is take a garden rake and smooth this all out, and it's that exciting moment for planting. I don't know about all of you, but for me it's like a springtime Christmas when I get to take out the tomatoes and start putting them in the ground. So what I'm going to do is space these out in a grid that allows me to put 2 tomatoes, and then I'll put in a support post, 2 tomatoes, a support post, on and on and on. It's only May 3rd here in New Jersey, so I'm taking a little bit of a chance putting these out now, but we got a trip to Italy in a couple days, and if I don't, you can see how tall they are already. So I'm going to plant them deep, and I'm banking on Mother Nature being good to me. So let's get going with this. All right, there's 24 plants laid out. Now, when you look at a tomato in particular, but it could be any vegetable. When you look at it in a peat pot, the soil was set lower than the edge of the peat pot, and the reason we do that is when you water it, you don't want the water in the soil to overflow. So you do it a little bit lower than that, so it acts like as a moat or a dam. The problem is when you plant it, if you leave this edge above the soil, then you have a wicking effect, which is, it's like a straw into a glass of water and you sip it out. The wind and the wind and the atmosphere suck up the moisture out of that top of that peat, and it dries out the plant too quickly. So make sure you bury this. In our case, because they're taller, we're going to bury them up to about that point. And the reason I can get away with that is tomatoes send out roots throughout the stem. So you can bury them pretty deep, like a submarine going down. And that way you get a stronger root mass. So if you have bigger tomatoes, don't panic, just bury them deeper. So I'm going to use this particular type of shovel, and I'm going to put them in the ground. And the other thing that I got to ensure is that these tomatoes are in a absolute razor sharp straight line, because later on when I go to string them, tie them, if they're not, if it looks like this crissy cross type of pattern, it's going to cause me all kinds of problems. So they got to be straight. So here we go. All right. This row of first row of probably six or seven rows is complete. Well, complete for planting. Then I'm going to take this stiff garden rake. You guys probably have one of these. And I'll smooth out in between the plants. Then I'm going to run a drip irrigation down, and then I'll cover it with straw. and we'll let time go by. Tomatoes will grow, and when they get about maybe 18 inches, 16 inches, I'm going to show you how I put the T-posts in, and then what's called the Florida weave, which is how we tie it up. And at that point, you'll see why having that line be so crucial. So this is the conclusion of seeds to soil, how to plant tomatoes, as far as saving your own seeds, germinating them, transplanting them, preparing the soil, and then ultimately getting them into the ground. The next series will be how to maintain and care for your tomatoes till harvest. So I hope, as always, you enjoy this latest series from Homesteading Italian. This is Matteo. Please give us a thumbs up, a like, some sort of love to us to let us know that you find these videos helpful, enjoyable, worth watching. All right, have a great day. Get out there in the sunshine. Bye-bye.